And now I see an opportunity to change the mood kind of radical because I saw something in the sign-up sheet that said, going to scare the hell out of you. Returning again to damage our minds, Juxtaprose.
How's it going, you guys? Tonight I'm going to be trying something a little different. I actually memorized my story this time, for the most part. Some of it's going to be a little bit made up on the spot, but this time I don't really like reading from paper because I can't look at you guys while I'm talking, and there's a lot of emotion that comes in my face that's kind of, goes along with the story. So tonight, I'm going to be trying that out. But first, hang on one second. I'm really bad about that. I always remind myself, I'm like, take your bottle of water, take your bottle of water, take your bottle. The title of the story is called Creek Man. We all have memories that, we have from childhood, mostly of our neighborhoods that we grew up in. And, that doesn't exclude me. I grew up in a pretty privileged neighborhood. It was, your average suburb filled with playgrounds and various schoolyards, things that are, a paradise to a child's imagination. And we, as a kid, my friends and I, we would run all over this neighborhood. There is nothing I can possibly do to fully explain how much this neighborhood meant to all of us. The playgrounds, the streets even, we would find various amounts of things to do every single day out of the smallest little thing you could find. Even a dirt mound would be, a castle, something just incredible. And my friends and I, we still kind of talk, except for one guy. His name was Joey. We don't talk anymore. Anyway, we had this creek that ran through the neighborhood that our parents tried so hard to keep us away from because living in Texas, there's mostly moccasins. That's the main thing I feel like, but there's also various amounts of parasites, garbage, whatever, bacteria, things that can creep and crawl, and things that parents are generally afraid of that their kids could catch. I know the parents in here probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And they had this story that the neighborhood would always talk about to keep us away from the from the creek. And it was this strange little quirky kind of tale about a guy they called Creek Man. And this guy apparently lived in the creek, in this bridge that the creek ran under, and this bridge was located near the highway, and it was a really, really long bridge. The tunnel was huge, and they said this guy lived in this tunnel, and he was an escaped mental patient from a mental hospital that was close by that had been since torn down and rebuilt as a Hilton. Now this guy, to further the story, he had experiments performed on him because this was an old mental hospital. They were trying to figure out ways to, different kinds of surgeries on the brain, so on and so forth. And the story went that he lost his eyes in a botched surgery. That they were trying to, some kind of alternative surgery that, they went in through his eye socket to get to his brain, and they took out his eyes. So he was constantly on the lookout for new pairs of eyes, and naturally his favorite prey was children. Figures. That didn't keep us away, though. That creek was our life. We ran through that creek. We would walk through that creek. We had so much time spent in that creek that I could probably stay up here for hours talking about it, but I won't. I remember at one point we also had we found this little flat area that was a little kind of grassy patch. There wasn't very much brush on it and stuff. And what we did was we went around the neighborhood and we found a bunch of furniture that people throw out, on big trash days. We would find that we grabbed all the furniture and we took them down there and we made this little kind of like open air clubhouse, I guess. We had a couch and an armchair and a table and all that good stuff. And this was kind of our kingdom, and what we would do is we would take turns being kings. It was a lot of fun. Oh, we being, I haven't even introduced my friends yet. We being me, obviously, Nathan, Joey, and Raymond. And as I said, we take turns being kings. Joey was kind of funny being a king. He would never really do very much. He was kind of timid. We'd kind of be like, so what are we going to do next? Are we going to go storm a castle? Are we going to go build a new treasure map to go find the next treasure? And he would always be really indecisive. And usually just kind of, he wasn't, he didn't really like being in that position of pressure. Raymond was pretty funny. He would just sit on the armchair all day long just reading his book, and we would try so hard to get him to get up and actually do something, but we usually ended up just doing something else. I remember nobody really liked it when Nathan was king because he was kind of mean. He would treat us like slaves. He would make us move around the furniture, and he'd yell at us if we didn't do it right. Hell, he'd yell at us anyway. He just found reasons to do so. I remember one time we were walking in the creek, and we found this stick that was kind of studded, kind of like an old medieval mace, but a little bit longer and slimmer. And he fashioned this into kind of a whip stick, and he would hit us with this thing until we sobbed for whatever reason he could find, and there were several. Take it from me. This was, of course, naturally until a huge storm came and washed all that furniture away, and we never really went back there again. Nathan was devastated, but us all, the other three, we were secretly pretty relieved because that wasn't fun. And looking back on it, Nathan really wasn't a very mean person. He didn't really come from a bad family. He didn't really have any kind of thing happen to him when he was younger. He just seemed like he just had an issue with just pushing us around. I guess it just made him feel better. That kind of kid. In fact, I remember one time Joey corrected him on something. I can't remember what, honestly. It has left my mind. But Nathan pushed him, and I don't think it was intentional, but he pushed him into a moccasin pit. And Joey got bit several times, survived, but he was in a lot of pain, and his screams sometimes still go through my head. After that, we never really went near the creek, not for a long time, at least a year. And then a little while later, we started going back. And now that we were older and a little bit more brave, kind of more curious about what was going on, we kind of started walking further and further up the creek. And we just, every single day, would find a new location, something further and something further and something further. Kind of like, we'd get to the one point that we'd never been before and then turn around and come back. I remember one day, we went down the creek a little further than we usually did. And that was the day that we actually found the bridge that they always talked about with the Creek Man story. And, I remember this day a lot because we'd all lied to our parents and said that we were going to go get donuts. Instead, we ended up just walking up this creek. The skies were real gray, and it was real rumbly, kind of like today. Just very dark and not a very good day. I remember we got there, none of us wanted to go into that tunnel. We were not afraid of Creek Man, at least that's what we said, but something still kind of kept us from going in. Naturally, Nathan pushed Joey continuously. Joey was always his favorite target. Nathan pushed him as hard as he could. He just kept badgering him, and badgering him was like, "Oh, come on, just run through and come back." And Joey wasn't having it. Who would? You were like maybe 9 or 10 years old. Who wants to run into a creek and into this tunnel that was so long you couldn't even see the end of it? It curved kind of near the end, so you couldn't even see the very last part of it. It just looked like it was a big tunnel of blackness. Unfortunately, Joey finally broke under the pressure, and he decided to run through. I guess it was probably his way of, kind of getting Nathan to shut up. And I remember that we listened to his footsteps splash further and further away, and then it just suddenly stopped. At first, we kind of thought maybe, he just tripped on something and he just was caught, or, maybe just found something that was kind of interesting him. He was kind of like that. But we kept calling his name and he didn't call back. Until we finally decided that we needed to run through and go find him. But none of us wanted to go in. It was, as I said, the tunnel was long and dark and terrifying, to say the least. And then we heard him start screaming. Just loud, shrill, horrible shriek that was even shriller than when he fell into the pit of moccasins. And that's when we started running into the tunnel. We ran and we ran and we ran and we ran. And we followed the screaming, but we couldn't find it. Like, it was almost as if we got close, but then it'd be further away again. And then I remember Nathan yelled that something had grabbed him. And we screamed and we ran as fast as we could, and we got to the other side. And we were all there, and we kept hearing Joey scream and scream. It was almost blending in with the cars that were running overhead. And then it just stopped, kind of like a recorder, like a tape recorder playing a song and just somebody pressing stop. It just stopped. We sat on the other side for a little while, worried, kept calling Joey's name, and he never came back. He never called. He never said anything. And finally, we just started screaming and just yelling for help because we were too afraid to run through the tunnel. And the other side of the creek had barbed wire all across it, so we couldn't even get out. Eventually, they found us, but they never found Joey. A search team was held for several weeks, and they never found him. When we got back home, Nathan found that he had scars. These, not even though they became scars, but he had these bruises on his neck and on his back, like scratch marks, like something had grabbed him and tried to scratch at him. Looking back on that, I wish I would have done something more, because his screams still run through my head, kind of like, as I said, it's like a tape recorder being played in my mind over and over again. And the search team never found Joey's body, but they did find a pair of eyes that had looked like they'd been crudely torn from their sockets, just laying in the middle of the creek. It was never identified if they were actually Joey's eyes or not, but I think they were. We never talk about it anymore. Me, Raymond, and Nathan, we all grew up. We went to high school. We went to college. And we never talked about it again. We never went near the creek again. Nathan won't even take off his shirt because he's afraid that he'll have to explain the scars that are all over his body. Nothing has ever really come up of that. And now that secret, that event of that day, kind of hides in the neighborhood like a vile secret that kind of lays in the belly of the neighborhood like a parasite. And now, sometimes, though, when you sit real late at night and you sit by the edge of the creek, sometimes, in the distance, you can hear a scream, kind of like a small boy being thrown into a pit of moccasins.